What if the core assumptions you hold about your own intellect, skills, and capacity for achievement are utterly mistaken? I don't mean mistaken in the superficial way self-help gurus spin it when they claim you can achieve anything just by wishing for it. I mean mistaken in a deeply scientific, meticulously verified, and highly practical way. There is a brilliant researcher named Carol Dweck, a distinguished professor at Stanford University. For more than 4 decades, she has dedicated her life to answering a single profound question. Why do certain individuals flourish when confronted with adversity, while others completely fall apart? The answers she uncovered fundamentally shattered everything we thought we understood about human capability. Her groundbreaking book is titled Mindset: The New Psychology of Success. Over the course of the next 30-plus minutes, I am going to guide you through every critical revelation, narrative, and case study within this masterpiece. By the time this audio concludes, you will never view your own boundaries in the same light again. Welcome to Wise Leaf Audiobooks. If this is your first time visiting, consider this your digital sanctuary for audiobooks, deep dive literature summaries, and perspectives engineered to genuinely revolutionize your thinking. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button if you are dedicated to your personal evolution. It takes just a second, costs nothing, and profoundly supports the growth of this channel. Now, let's lay out our roadmap. Because this text is incredibly rich, I want to give you a clear map of our journey today, so you don't miss a single insight. First, we will break down the 2 foundational mindsets discovered by Dweck: the fixed mindset and the growth mindset. You'll figure out exactly which one is pulling the strings in your life right now, completely behind the scenes. Second, we will trace these mindsets back to their origins. Hint: it points directly to your formative years and the specific feedback you received as a child. Third, we will analyze how these paradigms manifest in high-stakes achievement and professional athletics. Fourth, we will step into the realms of romance and leadership, proving that your mental framework doesn't just impact you, it fundamentally dictates how you express love, manage teams, and guide the next generation. Finally, and most importantly, we will map out the precise methodology for shifting your internal programming. This isn't just about theory. Dweck's data validates that you can physically alter your mental default settings. To maximize the value of this video and truly internalize these breakthroughs, having the complete blueprint is invaluable. I've placed a link to the original book in the description below so you can unpack the precise strategies and nuanced details that couldn't fit into this overview. Get ready for a deeply transformative, immersive experience. Get comfortable, clear your distractions, and let's dive in. Chapter 1: The 2 Internal Frameworks: Fixed versus Growth. Put yourself in the shoes of a college student. You've just received the results of a major, career-defining exam, and you flunked it. You didn't just underperform by a few points. You utterly bombed it. Now pause and observe your immediate internal reaction. What is the narrative running through your head at that exact moment? Dweck observed that individuals process this identical scenario in radically divergent ways, and those immediate, seemingly minor psychological reflexes ultimately map out the entire trajectory of a human life. The first group instantly concludes, "I'm just not intelligent enough. I never have been, and this test is the ultimate proof." They experience profound shame, vow to avoid similar challenges in the future, and essentially throw in the towel. The second group looks at the exact same failure and thinks, "Wow, that was incredibly tough. I clearly need to overhaul my study strategy. What can I extract from this experience?" They feel energized by the obstacle, lean directly into the discomfort, and prepare to try again. The exact same failure, yet two entirely parallel universes. The fixed mindset. This internal framework operates on a singular, rigid conviction. Your fundamental traits are permanently locked in place. You either possess intelligence or you don't. You are either born with natural talent or you are completely out of luck. In this worldview, you are dealt a specific genetic hand at birth, and that is the hand you must play for the rest of your days. This paradigm sparks a constant, exhausting desperation to validate your worth over and over again. Every single social interaction, career move, or creative endeavor feels like an intense evaluation of your identity. Because failing would mean you are inherently flawed, individuals trapped in this framework will go to extreme lengths to avoid taking risks. The growth mindset. This paradigm is anchored in a completely inverted philosophy. Your baseline capabilities are merely raw materials that can be cultivated through sheer dedication, strategy, and consistent labor. Natural talent and intellect are simply the starting line, not the finish. This perspective fosters a profound passion for learning and an unyielding resilience that serves as the foundation for any monumental achievement. People embodying this framework don't naively assume that everyone is identical or that anyone can become the next Einstein simply by trying hard. Rather, they recognize that a person's ultimate ceiling is entirely unpredictable and unknowable. It is impossible to calculate what can be achieved through decades of unbridled passion, relentless effort, and deliberate practice. The Junior High Case Study. To test this in the real world, Dweck conducted a landmark study tracking hundreds of adolescents as they transitioned into junior high school, arguably one of the most socially and academically turbulent chapters in a young person's development. Her findings were stark. Students anchored in a fixed mindset viewed this academic step-up as a direct threat. The moment the curriculum grew challenging, they assumed it meant they lacked inherent intelligence. Conversely, the students operating from a growth mindset perceived the exact same academic hurdles as an exciting frontier. To them, difficulty was synonymous with cognitive expansion. As a result, their academic performance either held steady or soared. Same environment, same educators, identical classrooms, yet completely contrasting destinies, driven entirely by the internal programming running inside their minds. As Carol Dweck brilliantly summarized, in the rigid world of a fixed mindset, exerting effort is viewed as a definitive sign of weakness. It implies that you lack natural genius, because if you were truly gifted, everything should come effortlessly. Chapter 2. how your internal programming was formed. At this point, you're likely asking yourself, where did my personal mindset actually come from? Is it encoded in my DNA? Or did life experiences sculpt it? The reality is, it was systematically taught to you. And more often than not, it was instilled with the absolute best of intentions by well-meaning parents, educators, and instructors who genuinely believed they were building your confidence. This brings us to one of the most counterintuitive and monumental discoveries of Dweck's career. The exact manner in which we praise success dictates the mental framework an individual adopts. Let that sink in for a moment, because its implications are staggering. The precise phrases we utter when a child triumphs, not when they stumble, but when they win, permanently sculpt their psychological relationship with adversity and education. Dweck and her research cohort gathered hundreds of students and presented them with a series of moderately challenging analytical puzzles. Every single child performed exceptionally well. Following the initial success, the researchers divided the children and offered two distinctly different types of validation. Group A was told, "Wow, your score was phenomenal. You must be incredibly smart at this." Group B was told, "Wow, your score was phenomenal. You must have worked incredibly hard on these problems." A solitary sentence of variation. Inherited intelligence versus deliberate effort. The researchers then presented both groups with a critical choice for their next task. They could either attempt an intensely difficult challenge that promised massive learning opportunities, or opt for an easy task highly similar to the one they had just mastered. The data that emerged was mind-blowing. The children praised for their innate intelligence overwhelmingly selected the safe, easy option. They refused to risk tarnishing their newly minted SMART label. On the flip side, the children validated for their effort overwhelmingly chose the grueling challenge. They were eager to see how far they could stretch their abilities. Dweck then pushed the experiment to its limits. She exposed all the students to an extraordinarily advanced set of problems designed for older age groups. Puzzles that were virtually impossible to solve. The intelligent cohort completely shattered under the pressure, interpreting the difficulty as a harsh verdict on their worth. The effort cohort, however, stayed completely locked in, experimenting with alternative strategies and maintaining their focus far longer. For the FINE phase, the researchers re-administered a test that matched the baseline difficulty of the very first exam. The results were jaw-dropping. The students who had been praised for their intelligence actually performed significantly worse than they did initially. Meanwhile, the students who had been praised for their process scored dramatically higher. The fixed mindset children had actually suffered cognitive regression simply by being exposed to an unresolved challenge. Consider the gravity of this reality. When you tell a child, an employee, or a partner, you are a natural talent, you are simultaneously handing them a compliment and planting a ticking time bomb of anxiety. From that precise moment forward, the instant they hit a roadblock, A terrifying question will echo in their mind. Am I no longer smart? Has my talent vanished? And if the answer is uncertain, they will retreat into their comfort zone to protect their ego. The guardians who raise the most adaptable, growth-oriented children utilize a completely different vocabulary. They praise the methodology, the concentration, the strategic adjustments, and the relentless endurance. Not "you're a genius," but rather, "I am incredibly impressed by the creative angles you tried when you hit a wall on that problem." This isn't abstract philosophy. This is a practical blueprint that should revolutionize how you engage with your kids, your corporate teams, your social circles, and, crucially, the ongoing dialogue you hold with yourself. Let's take these insights out of the academic laboratory and plant them directly onto the grandest stages of human performance, where the margins are razor thin and the mindset battle is waged in real time. Let's analyze elite achievement. Chapter 3: Mindset in Elite Achievement and Sports. When we observe history's most iconic figures across athletics, industry, and the arts, our cultural default is to attribute their supremacy to a single variable: DNA. We tell ourselves they were simply born different, that they are natural prodigies, uniquely anointed from birth. But Dweck's research, coupled with the actual, unvarnished autobiographies of global icons, tells a completely opposite story. Take Michael Jordan, universally heralded as one of the most dominant athletes to ever walk the earth. Yet, there is a foundational chapter of his narrative that our collective memory conveniently glosses over. Jordan was completely cut from his high school varsity basketball roster. When he discovered his name was missing from the list, he locked himself in his room and wept. He was utterly broken. But what he chose to do next defined the entire trajectory of his legacy. He converted that agonizing rejection into high-octane emotional fuel. He arrived at the gym before anyone else and left long after they departed, obsessively hammering away at his technical limitations. He never deflected a challenge. He hunted them. Years later, Jordan explicitly stated that his mountain of failures was the exact reason he achieved greatness. Every single missed shot, every lost game, every botched buzzer beater was utilized as raw material for growth. That is the growth mindset crystallized into human form. Dweck sharply contrasts Jordan's journey with countless naturally gifted athletes who operated from a fixed mindset. Because these players believed their raw talent was the sole anchor of their identity, the moment they encountered a superior opponent or a devastating loss, their psychological foundation crumbled. Dweck documents elite athletes who, in the aftermath of a defeat, would aggressively point fingers at their supporting cast, their coaching staff, or the officiating crew, literally anyone but themselves. To accept personal accountability meant accepting that their innate talent was insufficient, a realization far too terrifying for their fixed ego to tolerate. But Dweck introduces another historical titan who takes this philosophy even further, stepping outside the boundaries of sports. Consider the legendary narrative of Thomas Edison. In his relentless quest to manifest the incandescent light bulb, Edison encountered thousands of failed prototypes. When a journalist pointedly questioned how it felt to fail thousands of times without results, Edison's reply became immortal. "I have not failed. I've successfully identified 10,000 variations that do not work." This wasn't a clever publicity stunt or a cheap motivational cliché. It was a literal description of a mind that had completely integrated the growth framework at a cellular level. To Edison, an unsuccessful experiment wasn't a condemnation of his intellect. It was pure data. It was concrete progress. It was a necessary elimination, bringing him one step closer to the ultimate solution. A fixed mindset counterpart would have walked away after 100 setbacks, concluding, "I'm simply not engineered to be an inventor." What Dweck's exhaustive data reveals across centuries of human history is an inescapable truth. The most extraordinary disruptors are rarely the individuals blessed with the highest baseline talent. They are the individuals who fall madly in love with the grueling process of refinement rather than the intoxicating allure of the spotlight. They are the rare souls for whom failure is intensely fascinating rather than emotionally paralyzing. So how does this play out within the cutthroat ecosystem of modern business? What happens when an entire corporate empire is steered by either a fixed or a growth mentality? Corporate case study: fixed versus growth leadership. Dweck conducted a deep dive analysis of major Fortune 500 enterprises and the executives at their helms, uncovering a striking pattern. Institutions spearheaded by fixed mindset CEOs, leaders obsessed with projecting an aura of infallible genius, who surrounded themselves exclusively with yes men to stroke their egos, consistently cratered over the long term. These leaders possessed a zero-tolerance policy for dissenting opinions. They created environments where bad news was actively suppressed, and they routinely terminated brilliant minds who dared to flag systemic vulnerabilities. Consequently, the enterprise transformed into an echo chamber, devoid of authentic feedback, starved of truth, and incapable of evolution. Compare that to the leadership paradigm of Lou Gerstner when he took the reins of a struggling IBM. He didn't walk through the doors pretending to possess all the answers. Instead, he systematically engaged with employees at every level of the hierarchy, demanding unvarnished, brutal feedback to rebuild the corporate culture from the bedrock up. This is the ultimate dichotomy of leadership: the executive who demands to be the smartest person in the room versus the visionary leader who masterfully curates a room full of brilliant minds. Chapter 4: Mindset in Relationships and Leadership. Up to this point, we've examined these mindsets through the lens of solo performance and individual metrics. But what occurs when these opposing internal operating systems collide in the real world? Inside a friendship, a family dynamic, or a lifelong marriage? Dweck's findings in this arena are profoundly sobering, containing a reality that completely rearranged my perspective the moment I first encountered it. A rigid, fixed mindset is fundamentally incompatible with enduring romantic love. Romances and the illusion of effortlessness. Individuals anchored in a fixed mindset subscribe to a highly idealized fairy tale myth. They believe that a truly grand romance should be entirely organic, frictionless, and effortless. They believe that if you are genuinely compatible, you should instinctively click on every frequency. Your partner should read your mind without a single word spoken, and you should never have to labor to maintain connection. While this narrative sounds incredibly romantic on paper, it is psychological poison in practice. The reality is that every single relationship on Earth will eventually collide with harsh realities. Individuals evolve at different speeds. Communication channels inevitably suffer static, and deep conflicts arise. At that exact intersection, the fixed mindset individual immediately assumes the worst. We're simply mismatched. If this relationship were authentic, it wouldn't require this much work. Conversely, the growth-oriented partner approaches the exact same friction with a completely different posture. This is a challenging season, which means we need to elevate our communication, deepen our empathy, and evolve together. They process relationship conflict as an administrative problem to be solved through collaboration, rather than a definitive sign that the relationship is fundamentally broken. Dweck highlights a fascinating study tracking how different couples navigated intense relational friction. The fixed mindset partnerships immediately defaulted to blame, defensive posturing, and emotional withdrawal. The growth mindset couples actively listened, validated their partner's emotional reality, and leaned into uncomfortable conversations to find alignment. When researchers followed up a year later, the divergence was night and day. The growth-oriented couples reported vastly stronger, more intimate, and deeply fulfilling bonds, whereas the fixed mindset couples had either legally separated or degenerated into cold, emotionally detached patterns of cohabitation. The generational handoff. Parents unconsciously pass these exact mental frameworks down to their children through subtle, near-invisible daily behaviors. The precise facial expressions they make when a child underperforms, the metrics they celebrate at the dinner table, and the linguistic choices they deploy day after day. Dweck shares an inspiring account of a mother who structured her family dinners around a highly unconventional evening ritual. Each night, she asked her children two specific questions. What exactly did you learn today? What mistake did you make today that taught you a valuable lesson? This is a masterclass in psychological design. By intentionally repositioning errors and the messy process of learning as the ultimate achievements to be celebrated, rather than high grades or effortless victories, this mother was fundamentally rewiring her children's neurological relationship with failure. Those children grew up with the deep conviction that making a mistake is not an identity, it is an education. And that single paradigm shift completely liberates a human being to experience the full spectrum of life, because they are no longer shackled by the fear of looking foolish. This brings us to the core engine of our discussion, because diagnosing your current mindset is merely the diagnostic phase. Discovering precisely how to dismantle the old programming and install the new, that is where real, tangible transformation begins. Chapter 5. Rewiring Your Mindset. the practical protocol. Let's clarify an essential nuance that Dweck emphasizes throughout her work. No human being is a monolith. We are all a nuanced cocktail of both mindsets operating simultaneously. You might possess a radical growth mindset regarding your professional career, yet operate from a deeply entrenched fixed mindset within your romantic life. You could be entirely growth-oriented regarding your physical fitness, yet hold a stubborn, fixed conviction regarding your creative or financial capacities. The ultimate objective isn't to achieve a flawless, permanent state of growth-minded perfection. The true goal is acute self-awareness and the conscious power of choice. So, how do you actively begin the process of internal realignment? Dweck outlines a highly executable 4-step protocol. Let's break it down together. Step 1. Auditing the internal fixed narrative. The fixed mindset isn't an abstract concept. It is an active voice whispering inside your head. It manifests as a hypercritical internal monologue. The moment you step outside your comfort zone, it starts whispering. Are you absolutely sure you have what it takes? What happens when you fail and everyone sees? If you have to sweat this hard, maybe you just don't have the DNA for it. Look at them. They are leagues ahead of you. You'll never close the gap. Your very first task is simply to develop the mindfulness to hear this voice. Recognize it not as an objective truth, but merely as a fixed narrative trying to run its old routine. It's a familiar, deeply conditioned voice that thinks it's protecting you, but is actually keeping you small. Step 2. Reclaiming your agency. Once you identify that inner critic, you create a psychological gap, a conscious pause. In that precise moment of stillness, Dweck notes that you hold absolute agency over how you interpret setbacks, critiques, obstacles, and the achievements of your peers. You are under no moral or intellectual obligation to accept the fixed narrative as reality. You can acknowledge its presence. I hear you. Thank you for attempting to shield me from risk. And then you deliberately choose a growth-oriented interpretation. Step 3. Countering the voice with growth dialectics. You must actively talk back to the old programming, using the vocabulary of expansion. Let's look at how these internal dialogues should play out. The fixed voice. What if I completely bomb this presentation? I'll be a laughingstock. The growth counter. Every single industry leader flunked repeatedly before they achieved mastery. If I miss the mark, I will acquire proprietary data that cannot be learned any other way. The fixed voice. This is entirely too complicated. I need to cut my losses and quit. The growth counter. The fact that this is incredibly difficult means my brain is actively building new neural architecture. Let me abandon my current approach and experiment with a fresh strategy. The fixed voice. She's just an absolute natural. I could practice for a lifetime and never match that level. The growth counter. I am deeply curious about the exact routines, sacrifices, and strategies she deployed to cultivate that level of mastery. What can I actively study by analyzing her process? Step 4. Executing the growth-oriented action. This is the exact threshold where abstract philosophy transforms into biological reality. You must force your physical body to execute the precise action your fixed mindset is begging you to avoid. You submit the application for the executive role you aren't fully qualified for on paper. You initiate the uncomfortable, emotionally raw conversation with your partner. You enroll in the highly technical certification course that intimidates you. You launch the creative project you've been procrastinating on for months out of fear that the initial version won't be perfect. Every single time you execute a growth action in direct defiance of the fixed voice, you are quite literally restructuring the physical anatomy of your brain. Modern neuroscience completely validates this through the principle of neuroplasticity. Your brain is not a static machine. It is a highly malleable, dynamic organ that physically reshapes itself based on experiential input. Every time you lean into an obstacle, your brain builds entirely new neural pathways. Every time you acquire a skill through deliberate, focused effort, you insulate and strengthen those pathways. You aren't just adopting a new perspective. You are physically upgrading your cognitive hardware. If you are new to Wise Leaf audiobooks, make sure to subscribe. We deliver these immersive breakdowns every single week, performing deep dives into the transformational texts engineered to upgrade how you think, how you execute, and how you experience your life. And if you are ready to read the full, unbridled masterpiece, which I completely recommend you do, grab Mindset by Carol Dweck using the direct link located in the description below. Thank you for investing your valuable time and attention with me today. Until our next journey, keep pushing your boundaries, keep experimenting, and keep growing.